Let's start. So first of all, Thomas, thank you for being here. This is like we started organizing this kind of product talks like 1 year ago, more or less, and this is I think our sixth or seventh. So it's a pleasure for me to have you here. For my peers in we wrote a bit of context on how I met Thomas and why. So I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago. We were here in Friuli Venezia Giulia, which is the region where we live in Italy, and we decided to organize a community. So we built up a community called, with a lot of fantasy, FVG Devs. Yeah, it worked well. Like we ran, I think 4 or 5 meetups, if I'm not wrong, and we had also good traction. Some of them were like 40 to 50 people. To be in Friuli Venezia Giulia, believe me, it's very, very, very hard. So we were like excited, but then the community was stopped for a couple of reasons. So it worked, but then we need to stop it. But from that moment, I have the pleasure to have met Thomas, and we kept in touch. And so I asked him, well, you have a lot of experience, so maybe you can come here and share with us it. So he told me yes, and so here we are. We have a lot of questions, so thank you all for writing them. But I will start to asking you, Thomas, if you can, let's say, present yourself, tell us a bit of your story, background, and so that we can know you a bit more.
Yeah, sure. Thank you all for the invite, first of all, Seb. And so let's see very quickly, because I don't really like to talk about myself. So I started working at Elastic 5 years ago, almost 6 at this point, back in 2018. And I joined as an engineer to work in the Elasticsearch team, more specifically on the clients for Elasticsearch. I was working on the JavaScript one. I worked with that team for 3 years. Then I moved to people management, and with that I also switched teams. I changed also completely what I was doing. So I moved from the Elasticsearch team to the cloud team, and for a year I managed the Ingress team, which essentially is the team that builds the cloud proxy. And anything interesting about the cloud proxy? Well, it serves about today around 100 billion requests per day. It's a fairly high-intensive application. It handles also traffic filtering and other features related to traffic, as you can guess. After a year, so I started managing a second team, the IAM team, which, as you can imagine from the name, handles everything related to identity, authentication, and authorization. And I've been doing this now for about almost 2 years. I think in a month will be 2 years. And before joining Elastic, I worked also in a small startup for a couple of years, and then for some other time in a local company here in Friuli. And at the same time, I had a lot of fun working in open source projects, which is also very likely the reason why I was hired at Elastic. There's no reason to hide it. They say the two I'm the most proud of. One is Fastify, which is a web framework for Node.js. And the other one is Find My Way, which is the HTTP router of Fastify. And specifically, the reason why I'm very proud of that one is because we discovered a bit after releasing it that now also Netflix is using it, which is cool. And I guess that's about it.
Great. Thank you. So I was reading the questions. Meanwhile, we have like two kind of main topics. The first one, of course, is on the engineering part, so career progression and stuff. Then we have also some kind of product-related question on how do you do product on Elastic, how do you interact with product managers and stuff. So I would go for the first one with the engineering part, because we have a lot of engineers here, and maybe it could be more interesting. I'm picking a bit random, but I would start with a good question we have on the Slido, which is related to Elastic and how the career progression is structured in Elastic for engineers. If you can tell us a bit more about that, then we go deep on other questions.
Yeah, sure. So it's fairly simple, actually. So you get hired as an engineer, you do your work, you do a great job, you get promoted, and then over time you keep getting promoted. There is no expectation for you to move to tech leadership or to engineering management. Being an IC, that is the track, being an individual contributor. Then based on your skills and your career goals, you can ask and decide to move to tech management or people management or also product management, obviously. But that is absolutely not a requirement. So you can keep going up in the ladder until I think the highest title we have is distinguished engineer, something like that. And that's absolutely fine. There's absolutely no expectation for you to start managing a team because you are a good coder. Actually, that is probably the worst possible thing to ask to a great coder. Probably a short answer, but yeah, there's not really much magic happening.
It's good. So just to deep a bit more, there is another question a bit related. Maybe you already answered it partially, but there's someone asked, how do engineers choose in Elastic between being technical growth, having a technical growth, being individual contributors / having a managerial path?
So this is a good question. Let's say that it's something that you discuss with your manager. So generally, your manager asks you, what are your career goals, your career aspirations, and based on that, you work together on reaching them. So, for example, if you tell to your manager, hey, I hate anything related to leadership, I only want to being head down and coding, that is what will be prepared for you. While if you tell your manager, hey, I'd like to get more hands-on on leadership and handling big projects and stuff like this, then your manager will work with you on finding other opportunities to grow in that role. Then let's say that you want to move to tech leadership. There are essentially two things that can happen. Once you are at the right level, usually you get frequent feedback from your manager. Either you become the tech lead of your current team, if your current team doesn't have a tech lead or the current tech lead is leaving, or an internal position opens up from another meeting. You apply, another team. You apply, you do the interviews, and then if everything goes well, you get hired, and now you are a tech lead. By tech lead, and our definition of tech lead is an engineer that basically dedicates half of his time doing meetings, alignment, strategy. So there is no people management involved when you're a tech lead at Elastic. I'd say that in engineering, let's say the 4 main career choice you can have is individual contributor, people manager or engineering manager, tech lead, and PM. And the engineering manager handles the team, essentially. He works around career growth, assign the work to do, does gazillion of meetings to make sure that the team is working correctly. We make sure that the roadmaps between different teams are aligned. We make sure to understand exactly what are the priorities and understand the trade-off when making a decision. And the tech lead is basically a role that supports the engineer manager in all of this decision-making process. And then there is the PM, which you can easily guess what is, which is also part of engineering. Is not a separate company function. It keeps growing in parallel with ICs. So you have software engineer, product manager, senior, principal, and up to the ladder. And every team at Elastic has, we call it let's say the 3 people at the top. So every team has one engineering manager, one tech lead, and one PM, regardless of how much you go up in the organizational structure. So for example, I work in the control plane team, which is the team that handles all the orchestration layer for the cloud offering. And the control plane team has a director of engineering, a director of product, and we call it Uber tech lead. Then every leaf team inside this umbrella has an engineering manager, a PM, and a tech lead as well. And the idea of this is that you can meet, you can get requirements from the top. So you can have a top-to-bottom approach, but also a bottom-up approach, because you can quickly get the feedback from the people that are as close as possible to the product and to the code base. You're on mute, I think, or I can't hear you. One of the two.
Let's go with the question. Sorry, I have problems with mic. I was asking how many people are there in Elastic to understand the size.
So today is about 3,000 people. Engineering is a bit over 1,000. I think 1,100, if I have to guess. When I joined almost 6 years ago, it was 900. So there was a fairly quick growth, just fairly fun to handle.
Cass, go with question.
Yeah, isn't there an overlap having both a tech lead and engineering manager in the same team? As you said, no, engineering manager goes to work with people, so about career paths, growths, and so on. But of course, I imagine it works with the PM too on the product side to help the technological team, to do the things. So the role of the tech lead is mostly about the operative part on the technological side. So how those two completely separate, or do they overlap?
So that's a great question. And there is a bit of overlap between the manager and the tech lead. And but given the amount of work a manager needs to do and the amount of work a tech lead needs to do, it's very rare that we step on each other's toes. Usually the tech lead attends all the alignment meetings we do across teams from a purely technical point of view. So for example, in talking about the cloud team, we have a cloud team leads meeting where we discuss more about strategy, the current problems we need to solve, challenges. I don't know, we need to change how the on-call schedule works, things that are very, close to real life problems that also every IC can have. While there is also a tech lead meeting where they mainly discuss challenges they're having technically, or for example, a team brings up a topic saying, hey, we think that the current solution we're using for this problem is not really working. This is what you're suggesting. And given the impact of the solution, it gets discussed at the cloud tech lead level. So let's say is a balancing act between all the things that need to happen in a fairly big organization like ours.
Okay, clear. And the tech lead is not involved in the product meetings that the engineering manager has with the PMs?
It is involved as well from providing the technical perspective. So for example, so one step back. There's not really, we don't really prescribe what the tech lead should do. Every team have their own way of handling the role. The expectation is that there should be one, because that person is responsible to bring all the technical aspects of the team in external meetings. But the way this person does it changes. So in my two teams, both tech leads attend what we call the leads meeting. So the Ingress team have their own leads meeting, me, the PM, and tech lead, IAM, same thing. And in that meeting, we do a healthy mix of discussion between technical dev prioritization, new feature prioritization, and this kind of discussions. And the input that tech lead provides usually is in the realm of how big a task could be, or it brings us topic in terms of how urgent solving a specific technical depth is, this type of work.
Okay, clear. Thanks.
Other questions? Otherwise, we have a big one for you, Thomas, in the slide. Okay, let's move. How did you know you were ready to be a manager?
I didn't. This would be a very lame answer. So I can tell you how I arrived to people management. Maybe it helps a bit. So I had a really great manager in my previous team when I was working in Elasticsearch. And one day he told me, hey, I think this could be an interesting career path for you. So if you would like to talk about this, I'm here. Based on how my brain is wired, I rarely say no to an opportunity. Said, yes, let's talk about it. So we started having some meetings where he basically told me what his work entails, what his day-to-day is, what are his expectations. And then he suggested me to read a book, which basically it tells you on a very, it's a lot of real life experiences from a very, very experienced people manager. Basically, it tells you a lot of war stories. And his suggestion was, after you read this book, let me know if you still want to do the manager. If yes, let's talk about it. If you're curious, the book is this one, Managing Humans, from Michael Lopp. Super recommended. It's like, 300 pages. Yes, 300 pages. So you can read it fairly quickly. The font size is very big. I can probably read it without my glasses. And it's a really, really nice book. I think he's a director at Apple currently, but he also worked at Slack and many other big companies. And the book is divided into sections like what happens during a reorg, what you should do during a reorg, or how do you run a meeting, how you handle a difficult situation. And it's not that it's telling you what to do it's just telling you, this was my situation, this is what I did, this is what happened in the end. So you can also use it in terms of role playing it, and also try to think if you would like to be in that situation. And going back to the question, how I learned, what was it?
How you understood that you were ready to be a manager?
Okay, I still don't know if I'm ready to be a manager 2 years after, so I'm lacking it. This is all I can say. But compared to in software engineering, where you have a main challenge you will experience is that when you're a software engineer, you have a very, very quick feedback loop. You do a change, you run the compiler. Seconds at best, if your change has a problem or not. When you're a manager, the time scale changes completely. So for me, if something happens over weeks, I can get drunk and be super happy, like, whoa, wow, this was very fast. So it takes a really long time to see if your ideas and your approach is having the effect you like. And this probably is the main thing you will need to face as a new manager. And also a recommendation I got from all the other managers I talked with when I decided to do this was, if you decide to try this career path, you need to do it at least for 2 years. Otherwise, it's impossible to know if you are cut for it, if you had an impact on your team or not. Because again, the time scale is much, much different from being a normal software engineer.
Interesting. Thanks for the book. Noted. And there's another related question that is asking you, was there a different path you could have taken to grow inside Elastic, or it was the only way you had?
Oh, yeah, sure. I could easily move to principal or decide to go with tech leadership. This is absolutely open. So something that I come to learn, and a lot of people much more experienced than me will tell you, is that being an engineering manager is a career change. You're not growing into being an engineering manager. You are changing your career. So if you're a principal engineer, you say, okay, now I want to be a manager. Now you're a junior manager. You're not a principal manager or whatever. You're changing everything.
Okay. And also, thanks for the answer. It's very interesting. And also for not technical people, I mean. And there's another question still related. What were the key steps that enabled the transition for you?
So I said before, having a great manager that suggested me, helped me making the decision at the beginning, really helped. Reading this book really helped in terms of having an idea of what to expect. Even though once I started, I have to say I probably had 1% idea of what then really the job was, because it really changes based on the team, on the company. There is so many variables. There is also not like a Stack Overflow thing where you can go and ask. So you will very easily feel alone. The way we handle this at Elastic is that if you're a new manager, you get assigned a mentor, and your mentor is another manager, which is not your manager, it's literally someone else completely outside of your management chain. So you can be free to speak about any topic you want. Then obviously you have your manager that helps you, or your director at this point. And then something else we do is called the Manager Den, which is essentially a program where you get paired with other managers at a similar level than yours. So I get paired with other managers with a similar experience. You meet usually once a week or once every 2 weeks. And for about an hour, it's like, the Alcoholics Anonymous sessions. So you go there, you share your experiences, you give tips to each other. You have a safe space to vent, because there will be times where you need to vent, but you can't do it with your team because it's not your role to vent with your team. So building this safe space is something that really, really helps new managers, because definitely the feeling alone is something that you will start experiencing very quickly. Especially, well, I would say it works, is something you will experience both if you move to a new team and you start managing a new team, but it will probably especially happen if you get promoted, but actually you change to be a manager in the same team. So you move from being a teammate, a friend, to someone that decide what is your pay, if you're working well, so the relationship changes very, very quickly. So you need to have a net, to keep your sanity, essentially. Then let me see. I had a couple. I saw this question before, so I brought down a couple of notes to make sure and don't forget anything. Oh yes, ask questions all the time. You're especially when moving to a new team, you're probably the dumbest person in the room. That's okay. It's a terrible, feeling to have, but that's absolutely okay. On the contrary, you will see that being the person that asks the dumb question is also that as a result, the team is forced to see things from a different perspective. You can trigger discussions. So you look like dumb, but in the end, you're doing a favor to everyone. And be curious, learn from people with more experience than you. I can send, maybe you said, have a list of people that I follow on LinkedIn, Twitter, or whatever, and blog posts of really, really great managers with lots of suggestions that I can definitely share with you. And last, be very transparent with both your reports, because they know it's the first time you are a manager, so there will be no learning curve, but also with your manager and your peers managers, because you're probably going to need help. And if you wait too much time, then the problem is only going to get bigger.
Thank you. Send me the list with pleasure, then I share it internally. I will ask 3-4 euros for each one. And we have another question related to this topic. How do you measure and track the efficiency and effectiveness of the engineering team?
This is a fun question, and I have the feeling that you won't like the answer. So at Elastic, every team does this on their own. There's no a mandate way to handle this. So there are teams that use only GitHub, others that use Jira and GitHub, others that use Spreadsheet. There's not really a golden rule. And since a couple of years, most teams moved to Jira because it's easier to track work across teams. But then the way you measure efficiency, then this is really up to you. The way I do it in my two teams, So we use Kanban to track the work that's being done. We used to use Scrum. We didn't like it, so we moved to Kanban, and we use story points to size the work and the tasks. We tried also to use the time measure. That was a complete failure, and the reason is because if I ask you, okay, how much time this can take, you say, oh, 2 weeks. Well, over those 2 weeks, everything can happen: an incident, a more urgent task, or a broken build. So it's not something. It's very hard to use time as a measure for complexity. So then we move to story points, and then I use a mapping. And so for example, if someone tells me 5 story points, I know that is roughly a week of a single person working on the task 100% of its time. So, which means that in reality, it will probably take more than a week. And related to Kanban and Scrum, this is the only, and story points, this is the only agile terms you will hear me saying today, because that is only agile things we do. So we don't do postmortems, we don't do stand-ups, we don't do any of that. And the reason is because we never saw the benefit of this. It might work, with a team where there are a lot of juniors, they need more structure. But in our case, and the team is mostly senior or principal, and give them too much bureaucracy is only basically getting between them and the work they need to do. And so the very simple answer is I trust people to do their work. I don't look on all they request to make sure they output and is what I expect. We just discuss, and if after a while I see that the expectation not met, then I know something's wrong and I need to act. I usually notice this fairly quickly if something is not working in a good way. And the reason why we do this, by the way, is because we also work 100% remotely. So the entire engineering team works remotely. In my case, I think I cover pretty much every time zone. So one of my reports works in New Zealand, which is 12 hours away during winter, 10 over summer. And then I basically cover every time zone until Seattle. And I think if I don't trust them to do the work, it will be impossible for me even to breathe.
Cool. Beautiful, the part on the agile. That's I know it's opinionated in a lot of companies who don't do, but it's interesting.
I also have opinions on Jira if you want, but we can let this slide.
Don't talk, because also I have a lot of Jira opinions on Jira, but there are questions because before we move on. There is another good one inside the slide. People here? No? Silence? Okay. They are sleeping, Thomas. This is the secret. I have another question here. What processes are in place to manage technical debt in a way that balances product improvements and long-term maintainability?
So this is a good question. I think I partially answered before. So the way the engineering team is structured allows to have top to bottom direction and bottom up and responses. So we get from product all the input we need in terms of priorities, what the next thing we need to work on. Is A more important than B? But on the other hand, and we trust the engineering team, so the individual contributors, to push up the information in terms of, hey, this code base and it's getting old. This specific function is going to cause problems, or hey, the testing system we're using right now is not working as it should. And based on what we get, then it's the job of the manager to balance these two things, and then essentially go to my directors, both PMs and the engineering director, and explain to them why we think something is important. Then we have an agreement on when it should be prioritized, and then we do it. So there is not really a structured format. Again, we really trust the people on that boots on the ground to tell us what is we need to work on next.
Good assist. Thank you for the answer. Good assist for another question. We are moving a bit on the more product side. So I will try to ask you, how do you interact with your product manager, or if you want, how are you organized in terms of product teams? So you already told us a bit of how you interact, but going deeper on routines, are you involved in discovery, for example?
So the way PMs are integrated with engineering, again, PMs are part of engineering. It's not another org structure. And if you find a manager or a tech lead, there is also a PM at every level. And the way we work together, so I have a weekly meeting always scheduled with my PM, where we discuss what's coming up next and what is the status of the current things. Plus, and we have, based on the topic, for example, we need to launch a new product which requires a cross-team effort. Then there is probably an ad hoc meeting for that, where I still meet with my PM and other PMs at that point to discuss what to do. And in terms of how soon I'm involved with the product, I'm not involved in the product discovery, and that would be asking definitely too much. Usually when the PM has enough to bring up the idea, he takes it to the leads of their own team. So for example, as IAM, we want to, I don't know, something that we shipped 1 year ago was role-based access control. Some time ago, the PM entered the room and said, hey, lots of customers asking for this. This is what we are thinking. And then we start discuss. There is an initial discussion to have understanding. So basically where me and the tech lead bombard the poor PM of questions to express our concern, raise what are the possible problems, so the PM can integrate that and keep working on the discovery. Then the next step usually is we come up with functional requirements, we discuss them, and at that point, usually we assign the project to an engineer, and the engineer needs to come up with a technical design. Again, other feedback loop to make sure that during the technical design, there is nothing that might not work compared to what are the expectations for the functional design. And once the technical design is approved by everyone, we schedule the actual work. In terms of when we schedule it, the best case scenario is today I finish the technical design doc, on Monday I start working on it. Worst case, if multi teams need to work on it, then it's my job to sell to the other teams why this project is important to them and get it prioritized sooner rather than later. And this is something that me and the PM play together to get that prioritized somewhere else.
I have a couple of questions just bumping in my head. Where are designers in your company? Because you told engineering managers, tech leads, and PM. And do you have designers? Yes, no?
Yes, we do. We have a UX org, which lives separately from engineering, but basically the way it works is once the PM knows, the project knows what want to do, they go to the UX org and says, hey, we need a UX engineer to start working on this. It gets assigned, and then you work with them during the entire initial phase of the project.
Okay, so you have like as a service, design as a service team for you.
Yeah, more or less. But this is mainly because I don't really have probably a good percentage, so take this with a pinch of salt, but probably out of all the work we do, no more than 30 or 40% at best is actually UI work that the user sees. Most of it is stuff under the hood, like orchestration problem, how to distribute the data, how to handle caching. So problem where a UX designer is not really their own field. In terms of UX for the APIs, we trust the engineers to give meaningful feedback about that. Which might backfire because engineers tend to overcomplicate things, but you're never alone.
We know. And also when you talk with your PM and you need to discuss about new features versus technical depth, you already told us a bit before about this, but how you engage with your PM to decide what to do first.
Well, let's say it depends on the type of technical debt. If it's something fairly small, I probably don't even need to check with my PM, because it's something that can be done in a couple of days. Just do it and get it done with. If it's something bigger that will impact the product roadmap, then we need to explain why this is important and how this is impact positively, over the long term, the product roadmap. Also, something else that we do at Elastic that I really, really enjoy is what we call the operation KPI review. So once a week, we meet with the leadership of every team that runs at least one service in our platform. And the first part of the meeting is the incident review. So we discussed past incidents, what went wrong, what we can do better for the future. And the second part is one team at a time. So we change every week, shows their own KPI, how we are doing, and then everyone else gets to ask questions. So it's something super cool once you are a listener to the meeting, or you participate because you are curious, want to ask questions. It's less cool if you are presenting, especially if you're presenting an incident, because you are in the hot seat. But I know that happens to everyone after a while. And that is also a very good forum to discuss what to do with the very big technical debt items that we have in our backlog. And the reason to be clear is because in this meeting, the CPO is attended by the CPO. So no one can override him. If he says something is important, you're good to go.
Even the CTO can't override the CPO.
I don't think it ever happened, because they probably will agree in that case. But I know they meet and discuss, so I'm not in that room.
Good enough. I don't know if we have questions in chat. Okay, I want to work there. Okay, and a few questions left. Yeah. So we are moving a bit on the community topic. We have some questions there. First one, random picked. What are the key challenges you face when you integrate community-driven developments into the main Elastic products?
That's a good question. I would say it's very likely a similar answer I will give in terms of I'm running my own open source project, which is you get this random person from the internet sending you a contribution, and you get to decide if you want to integrate it or not, and you do it based on is this something useful? Is it adding a super edge case that then is not really helpful for most of the users? But the main driver you get when you make this type of decision is you will be the maintainer for that code going on. This person, it's very hard that they will stay around. If they do, usually you hire them. So separate process after that point. And so it's really tough to decide if something is worth to be integrated. Usually what we recommend to do is don't go and open up a request with 14,000 line changes, because maybe that something is won't be accepted. Open an issue first, describe what you want to do, how you want to do it, discuss with the maintainers of the project, or with the company, in that case, the maintainers of Elasticsearch, is something that is worth adding. If the answer is yes, then work on it. I can't hear you. I probably say this sentence like 15 times a day.
Yeah, we have a senior expert here that is laughing. Rick is always on mute, just for your information. But we have another question, like you partially answered, but the question is, can maintaining a portfolio of open source projects be an effective strategy for attracting talents in your company?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. I guess it depends on the project, but I think I don't have a good number in mind, but a lot of people I know at Elastic were hired because they arrived through an open source project. So definitely yes.
Okay, and what about you? As your involvement in open source projects change over time in terms of personal enjoyment versus, they say, professional obligation?
And as in, I'm working in open source as a professional, or is my current job title allowing me to work in open source for personal reasons? What is what you're asking?
Well, the idea, I asked the question, hi, I'm Kamal, I asked the question. The idea is that usually when you work on open source projects, you kind of want to get away from the work-related stuff. So you have to try, for example, trying a new programming language, trying a new also business logic. So the idea is that working on a company as known as Elastic, what has great open source projects and a lot of contribution, makes you like have a fun also working on other projects, like for example changing programming language or working on other stuff. That was the idea of my question.
Okay. There is, talking specifically about Elastic, there is no rule about you can't contribute to outside projects. Actually, and it's even, we're very happy if you do it. And then depending on the project, like if we, for example, we are contributing to, I don't know, Rust, the language, probably we are not going to sponsor you because it's not something that helps the company direction. But we sponsor lots of engineers to work on an external project that then we use. So the most simple example is Apache Lucene, the full text search library of Elasticsearch. I think that a large part of the contributors are actually today employed by Elastic. Then if you want to get and learn, create your own small projects to learn a new language, yeah, absolutely, why not? Then also, if that project in the end is something that could be interesting for the company, let's discuss, but no one will stop you to learn something new.
Thank you. A few left. Could you share an example of a particularly successful project at Elastic that started as an open source initiative?
Well, I'll say the lame answer than another example. Elasticsearch, literally the company was built on top of it. That was an open source project. It's also actually a very fun story how that started. And another example is one of the products we sell is the Elasticsearch observability product, where basically we sell you an all-in solution with APM, universal profiling, synthetics, all the things to monitor and observe your projects, your infrastructure, and single machines, everything. And we saw that it was a good opportunity to standardize the way we were collecting all the information. So we created Elastic Common Schema. And this was, I don't want to say something dumb, but I will say 4 years ago, more or less. And around, I would say a couple of years ago, don't quote me on this because I don't work in the observability org, so I might have wrong dates, but some time ago, the OpenTelemetry effort exploded. Now everyone is investing in OpenTelemetry because we don't want to have, silos, but we want to have a common schema on how we approach observability. And what Elastic did, since the Elastic Common Schema project was very successful, it was donated to the OpenTelemetry initiative, and now is part of Elastic Common Schema is part of the OpenTelemetry specification. So that was an example of a successful project. Then if you go open the Elastic organization on GitHub and you sort by stars, you will see there are dozens of fairly successful projects.
Oh, thank you. There are questions about open source topic, I would say, here in chat. I know we have some fun of open source in Europe. Go, Kamal.
No, it's me. I'm the fan for open source. The idea, I asked a question about the idea of opening, because we are like a closed base code company. Like the idea of, about opening our like internal tools that we build or packages that we build could be, in your opinion, your experience, a good thing to attract more people, or could be also maybe detrimental because we have to also manage, like, because we work on web, so we have to manage also issues with security. Like if you heard the latest thing about the Unix thing, and then so it, in your opinion, in your experience, could be a good thing, or it has to be like structured internally in the company, or it could be also something that we can do as software engineers. Thank you.
That's a good question. I would say the easy answer is yes, it will help. The less easy answer is it really depends on what you're publishing. So you also need to be super, super careful about what you're publishing. Like if you're publishing a piece of your code base that you don't want to be published, and be very careful on how you basically structure your code base in a way that parts of it can be published and parts should not be published. Like if you do what Twitter X, whatever the name is, did 1 year ago, that they published the algorithm, you go back, look in the repository, is something that they stripped out of who knows what, and has been there with a single commit for a year. That is a completely useless open source project. If you do something in public, you want people to see that it's live and active, that there is a contribution happening, you are accepting also contributions. So then it definitely needs to be something helpful. Like if you open source, I don't know, your UI components, like we did, but no one outside of Elastic uses Elastic UI, because why should you? I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. While, for example, if you developed a nice tool to do debugging, then that's probably definitely more interesting. Then it's also kind of a double-edged sword. You also want to make sure, let's say, that the code you're publishing is great code. If you're publishing code of a super legacy program, badly documented with an ugly syntax and who knows what, that will probably scare away people instead of calling them in. So it's a balancing act.
Thank you. Gotcha.
Okay.
Do you have some kind of path or tool to allow people to improve their communication skills?
It's a great question. We have an internal learning. We have two actually learning platform. One is Elastic only internal. The other one is LinkedIn Learning, where there are a lot of trainings you can attend on how to do effective communication, how to improve your communication skills, and so on and so forth. The challenge here is that it's not something you can easily measure. I can't say, hey, before you were sending, I don't know, a feature every month, now you're sending a feature every 2 weeks, whatever. So it's not something you can say, before you were here, now you are here. It's something that you need to get as a feedback from other engineers, from usually the tech lead really helps you in this kind of situation. You need to attend meetings where this person that has the communication problem, to see if the situation is improving and provide them meaningful feedback very often, and especially very quickly, so the person have all the context still in their mind. The challenge here is that it depends a lot if the person is aware they are having the problems or not. If they are aware, it's definitely much easier because they are eager to get your feedback and improve. If they are not, usually it's a bit of a different conversation. But in any case, from my experience at least, setting up clear expectation is super important, and also making very clear that you're not doing this because you want a person to go away or have something against them. You're doing it because you really want them to improve and be at the best they can as team members. It's probably obvious, but I think it should be said.
About feedback, about this question, do you have only a top-down approach or bottom-up or mixed? I don't know. Is simple to share feedback between peers, but is not really simple to provide a feedback to your manager sometimes. Do you have some kind of flow about this?
So that's a good question. Feedback between peers, we usually have two ways. So you can either use our internal HR tool, which is Workday, to send we call it the anytime feedback. Basically, you send it to the engineer. Engineer gets. I actually don't remember if the engineer gets it, but definitely the manager gets it. Then when we prepare for the quarterly conversation, usually I ask to the report, hey, what are the people you work the most with, also outside of the team? And then you reach out to them soliciting for feedback. And this is usually the hardest part because it takes time to provide meaningful feedback. I tried multiple versions of this, and the one that I saw worked until now, worked better is to ask what this person should keep doing, what this person should do more of, and what this person should stop doing. Then you make it very clear that this is anonymous feedback, so only you can read it, and then when you're going to deliver it, you will even more anonymize it, maybe mixing it with other things that you still wanted to say, and then deliver the feedback. In terms of you giving feedback to your manager, there are mainly two ways. You can obviously talk to your manager. If you tell the manager, hey, I think that the way we are working together is not working, and if your manager gets mad, you have a really terrible manager, but you probably know that already. Otherwise, a decent manager will try to understand what's not working and work with you to solve the problem. Otherwise, you should have a conversation with your skip level, so your manager's manager, and share with them the feedback saying, hey, this is a situation, this is why it's not working, this is why I'm not feeling comfortable talking with my manager about it. And then if your skip level is a good manager as well, you will try to solve the situation.
And do you feel confident to provide a feedback not to your direct manager, but maybe to the top of the chain? I don't know if you have I don't know, a bad tech, tech, or I don't know if you related to communication skills naturally, if you feel confident to provide a feedback.
If I'm feeling confident personally, you mean, or in general?
In general, in your company, what is the feeling about that?
Yeah. Everyone knows you can do it. I don't think everyone does it when needed because it's still uncomfortable as a thing to do. And but in the end, people will leave a company mainly for three reasons: money, they are getting bored, and they have a terrible manager. So if you have a terrible manager, it's just up to you to talk with someone up to let them know that something is not working. Or if you don't want to spend that energy, you either change team, which means also changing manager, or leave, which is obviously the worst possible outcome.
Thank you.
So I think we have done. We have one left question, but I think we already discussed this. Related to how you balance, let's say, business as usual versus last-minute requests. So since we are a bit out of time, I would say if there are other questions here. Otherwise, we say thank you to Tomas, and we leave him.
By the way, the last-minute impactful request, and that is my favorite thing to do when a PM from especially another team enters the room and say, hey, we need this tomorrow. Usually what I do, I open my roadmap and I say, okay, what do you want me to sacrifice? And that is always a very fun conversation because it's never easy to find it.
You win or are you losing usually?
Oh, it depends. And I don't know. I never kept track, but let's say it depends if the next thing you need to work on. So for example, now we need to work on a project which I know is blocking few millions of contract. It's a fairly big thing. It's very easy for me to know to say, hey, I can't, go talk with the CPO if you don't agree. While there are other moments where it's much easier to lose the discussion, or even it might make sense what they're asking you to do. Usually, the order we want to follow is security takes highest precedence over everything. So if it's a security problem that trumps everything, then you want to have stability, durability, speed. Features is the very last thing in this chain of important things you want to focus on. So it depends on what you're asking me to prioritize.
Thank you. Guys, if you don't have other questions, I think we can stop here and say thank you to Tomas.
Grazie Thomas.
Grazie.
Grazie mille Thomas.
Grazie.
Grazie Thomas, grazie